Another Micro B video for you guys today. We are getting this thing ready for box stock racing. I have a race coming up at the end of the month, and I've been getting hundreds and hundreds of laps testing, tuning, and practicing with this thing. And I'm going to show you guys basically what I'm doing to get this thing nice and consistent, as well as give you some suspension tuning tips when it comes to the Micro B. So let's dive in and get these things a little faster than they already are. All right, so when most clubs say box stock, they mean it. So down to the transmitter, even in most cases, like you pretty much don't get to upgrade anything. Whatever comes out of the box is what you're going to race. So we're going to stick to that with this one. And we're going to go ahead and go through. And our main goals are basically to find and eliminate any binding and do what we can with most of the slop. Now, a lot of the slop on the Micro B comes from these links here. They're just, the way they fit on the balls is just not really perfect in any way, shape, or form. Not a lot that we can do about that, but there still is a lot of slop that we can reduce or minimize to get a more consistent experience. Okay, so with the wheels and tires removed and the shocks detached from the A-arms, we can go ahead and we can just check really quick for any binding. And we don't have any there, obviously, as you can see. It's moving very freely, everything's moving nicely. But one thing that I did notice is that I had a little bit of play up here where we connect to the A-arm here, where the hub and spindle here connect. It was right in there. And basically how I dealt with that is really, really simple. I just tightened this screw. I couldn't find a shim that was big enough, or small enough, I should say, to get in there and fill that space and not cause binding. So I just tightened this screw up a little bit here, and basically I tightened it up until I didn't have the wiggle anymore, and then I loosened it until it was moving nice and freely. So that was one particular area that I checked. And also the top and bottom screw here, there was a little bit of wiggle up and down there, and I just tightened those down, but also made sure that it was moving nice and free. In order to check that, you're going to need to detach this little guy right here, the steering rod. But if you get that tightened up top and bottom, and you can get it moving nice and free left to right, then you're good as long as you don't have any wiggle there. So I did that on both sides. It's nice and free, everything's tight, and I removed a lot of wiggle that was there. I did notice on my other Micro B that those screws were correctly tight and one was too tight. So I had some binding. So you'll get either way, but these joints here are a good place to start checking on the front end. Now another place where you get some major slop is in the steering, and this is also after I fixed it. So I'll show you guys what I did up in there so that you can try to replicate it yourself if you have some slop in your steering. But the way the steering servo and bell crank system is designed on this just has a lot of movement in it as a whole. So it's not going to be perfect, but we can definitely get less than what it has stock. So I'll show you guys how we did that. And we're also going to dive in here and we're going to take a look at where the A-arms themselves actually connect to sort of like the bulkhead piece. As you can see, there is a little bit of movement there. I'm going to try something up front. On the back, I was able to do it. I stuck some sticky tack in the front and rear section of like the bulkhead where they hold the hinge pins. I don't know if that's called a bulkhead or just like a hinge pin holder, but whatever it is, there's a little bit of sticky tack back in there, which is just that little sticky poster stuff, the tiniest amount. And I got almost no play now in the back here. Like it is super, super, super tight. So we're gonna try that in the front, but all we can really do it with on the front is this end holder. We can't really stick it in the A-arm here because the A-arm needs to be able to move freely, and with some sticky tack in there, that's just not gonna happen. Okay, so in regard to the steering, there are two main things that I did and two main places that I noticed that there was some slop that I could get rid of. So I used 2 pieces of tiny little blister pack here to make some shims to go on these bell cranks. So basically what you have here is these 2 little guys right here connect to the rack, which connects to the servo via this arm. And it's a lot of places for slop to exist, to be honest. But what these guys were doing a lot was sliding up and down on their little pins, and that was causing a little bit of like wasted energy, I should say, while you're doing your steering action. And back here, these 2 little screws right here, they also were just a little bit too loose, and there was like wiggling going on where these connect to the actual rack itself. So by tightening these up just enough, just like with the hubs and everything, just enough to where you have a full, easygoing, no binding kind of movement, but also no play was a big thing. And then getting these little shims on here was also a big thing. I was able to eliminate a lot of just play in the steering. So can't do it all, can't make it perfect. You still have, you know, all these little connecting rods, these plastic guys here all throughout that just have slop in them, and that's going to be something we have to deal with in box stock. But you can help by getting your bell crank right. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take this piece up front here off, and we're going to go ahead and handle that front hinge pin and see if we can get these arms just a little bit better. All right, so as you can see, what I've done there is I have put some sticky tack, the absolute tiniest amount of it in there, and used an Allen wrench to kind of mash it to where it's more of like a bushing now. The reason this is going to be fine here and not in most places anywhere else is because it can be static. The hinge pin itself can be static in here because the arm moves along the hinge pin. Unfortunately, the back piece that holds the hinge pin in is the arm, so we are not going to be able to get the play out there just because the arm needs to be able to move around that hinge pin freely. But up front here, as long as this stays inside of this piece, this should be good and should help us remove any play or issues there. All right, so with our hinge pin cover put back on, we have a nice free suspension here. And let's see how much slop we were able to get out of the front. So that looks pretty good. Like, that is not very much movement at all. And it's really nice that we could just use that little bit of sticky tack. Like I said, you just have to use a really tiny amount and be careful not to cause any binding issues. And you should be good. It should really help keep some of that movement out, some of that unnecessary movement. The steering, on the other hand, is a little bit trickier because we really aren't able to get the movement completely eliminated. You can see right there that we're still having a good bit of wiggle. And that's where that screw connects there. And it's just a matter of tightness, you know, like you don't want it too tight, but you don't want it too loose. So you just got to keep working with that and get it how you want it to. That is probably about as good as it's going to get. We can always get in there and retighten and check things, but that's probably as good as we're going to get. I think that an aluminum bell crank setup would be so very good for this, just because if the tolerances are right, you could have almost no slop there and very direct steering. Another point too is just, like I said, these tie rods, like if these were like some regular turnbuckles with like good rod ends on there, we probably wouldn't have as many issues. But since we're doing box stock, we're really not allowed to upgrade that, or the bell crank for that matter. So it's about as good as we're gonna get. Okay, so around back, we are both more simple and more complex. Our main joints that we have to worry about are here and right here where the hinge pin is. So right here, you just have the one screw. You're gonna do the same as you did on the front hubs, but you only have the one to worry about, which is nice. And on the back here where the hinge pins are, now I've already done this, so I'm not taking it apart and showing you guys, but we have the one cap here that holds the hinge pins, and then up here in the front, we have another one. So you pretty much have to remove the whole back to get to that, but because mine are already sticky tacked, I just don't want to take it apart and mess it up because I got it how I wanted it. But you'll just put a little sticky tack in each one of these, and that should reduce the amount of play you have on these rear A-arms pretty significantly. You should be able to get it almost all the way out because you don't have to have the one side like on the front where it's in the A-arm. You don't have to worry about that. You can have the sticky tack in all four corners. All right, so now that we've got as much slop as we can out of the chassis, we can sort of start to trust our suspension setup a little bit more, and we can rely on like consistent results. So now we can start to like, you know, experiment a little bit with the suspension. And so here's what I found in my case. There's a lot to suspension, and there's actually not a lot we can do on a box stock class Micro B. But there is a little bit because we have two mounting positions up top here and two mounting positions at the bottom on the A-arm there. And moving those mounting positions, whatever you choose, you can get some pretty good differences in the way it handles. So up front, on mine, I really like the stock configuration actually, because the more upright shock position, so actually let me back up for a second here. If your shocks are more upright, they are going to be a little bit better on like the bumps and jumps, and they are a little bit more ready to compress on like when weight shifts and things like that change. The body is a little bit more happy to roll when your shocks are a little bit more upright like that. So they're stiffer at the very bottom of their stroke than they would be if they were more linear and laid out. But overall, they are more happy to compress throughout the stroke entirely. So up front, I like them up a little bit more because when I am off power, so I am no longer accelerating, the body of the car is going to slightly go forward and compress these shocks. And in turns, I'm going to do a little bit more bite up front. So when I slow down and I turn, this inner, let's say this was my outer wheel, it's gonna bite a little bit more because I'm gonna put all the weight up on this front tire here. On my small high grip track, that works out really well. Now, if you had them a little bit more laid out, then you would be a little bit better on the bottom, like it'd be a little bit softer here, but it is less likely to compress as far as it would be on like a more upright shock. So that would be better on like a faster track with like bigger, wider turns, and it's a little bit better for stability and stuff like that too. A more upright shock like this, I'm a little bit more aggressive turning or starting turns, and that is perfect for my track. Around back here, I did make a change. So I've tried them in all sorts of positions, and the front being stock was good for me. But on the back, actually, I moved the lower portion of the shock out one hole. And what that's given me is a little bit more progressive suspension here in the back. I was hoping that it would keep me from bottoming out when I hit the jumps, because I was noticing that when I hit the actual jump, that I was slapping my chassis against the jump, and it was causing the chassis to do this in the air a little bit. So it did do that, and I got a little bit more stability out of the car as a whole, and it feels good. A more progressive setup on the track that I'm doing. It's a smooth EVA foam track. I got rid of the carpet. Or if you are racing on carpet even, this kind of linear setup is going to be really, really good for that kind of situation. The only reason that the front is this way is so that I can get more bite. Now, a situation where you would want these back shocks to be more up and down, like vertical, is if you were on like a really, really rough track. You can get, the suspension is more ready to soak up those bumps quicker, and that will allow you to have more traction on like the rough stuff. But I would highly suggest that you just experiment and see what works best for you. These are set up really well stock, so there may not be too many changes that you'll want to make, but it just depends on your track, your driving style, and your preferences. The next thing to talk about is tires. We don't really have a lot of options with tires. First of all, because it's box stock. Second of all, because it is the Micro B, and I don't even think there are tires available for it. But luckily, these on the track surfaces that you are likely to be running on, which is carpet and like RCP, are not really wearing very quickly at all, and they are really, really grippy on those surfaces. I haven't had any like sliding issues. I don't even think I can burn out on the EVA foam track I have. And RCP is grippier than that. And so if you're at a real track, they'll probably have RCP, and you probably have plenty of grip. So these are great in the back. Not really a lot of wear that I can account for at this point. And like I said before, I have got hundreds of laps on this guy. And so that's good. That's really good, because one of the most expensive things about racing is tires. And not only are these cheap, but it doesn't look like we're going to have to replace them left and right. Up front here, these tires do actually show a little bit of wear. So not this one in particular. Oh, there's a little bit of sticky tack stuck to it. Not this one in particular, but this one here. If you see, this outer part of the tire here is getting a little bit of a ridge on it. So, and the inner part even. So this is just from turning and slowly wearing away at these ribs. Not bad. It's just, you know, for a fact that we're definitely pushing in the front a little bit. And we might want to rotate these around just to get more tire life out of them, because I don't have this on the other side. So it must be because my track has more of one turn than another, or one fast turn that's wearing it quicker than the other. Whatever. Rotating them is fine. A set of wheels and tires for this bad boy I think is like $15.99. Not a big deal. They're mounted to the wheels and you're good to go. Not too bad there. One thing we're not going to talk about is motor break-in in this video. So motor break-in is something that people do a lot when it comes to stock racing. Whenever the stock can is involved, we're doing underwater break-ins, and we're talking about different voltages, and we're talking about how long and where, and should you lube it after. There's a lot to motor break-in, and we're not going to be able to cover all that today. Honestly speaking, you will get a little bit of an edge out of a proper break-in, but you will also reduce the life of your motor as a whole. It's up to you whether you want to get into that. I might make a video on it. Let me know if you want one. If not, there are like a bajillion videos on YouTube probably on motor break-in, and there's so many articles online, and you can just read and read and read about all the different ways people do it. Yeah, we won't talk about motor break-in, but we will talk about the transmission and the differential. And I have unfortunate news here, because I don't believe that the differential is very tunable. So I got in there and I took a look at it, and it doesn't seem like it's got any kind of seal. Like the Mini Z, you can tune the diff with grease, but that's because it has like little plates that go over it. It's not sealed per se, but it is, you know, hold some grease long enough to like win a race or two. And it's also a lot faster and easier to change and replace that grease whenever it does finally splatter all out. And here the diff is very, very open and free. It's like not sealed with anything. There's no plates around it, nothing like that. It's just a metal gear with little metal spider gears inside, and it's hanging out right there. So yes, you probably could get a sticky grease to stick to it for a while, but I don't think that it'll last very long, and I don't think you'll get very meaningful changes out of that. Because it's just going to spin it right off. It's sitting right there next to the idler gear. It's just, everything's in the open. So, yeah, I don't think we're going to get much out of the diff until we get like a ball diff available or something like that for this guy, which is unfortunate, but it's kind of okay because this open diff action is going to be great on smaller, tighter tracks, and that is most likely what you're going to be racing on for the majority of your time with your Micro B. Anyway, you guys, so those are pretty much all of the changes that I've sort of made to my Micro B over the last week. Getting that slop out was super helpful. It just feels a lot better, a lot more consistent. My lap times are faster, and I know that they're faster because I can compare to this one, which is just completely fresh out of the box, and I'm definitely getting better with this one than I am this one. Like, I enjoy the feel of this one a little bit better. The suspension setup on the Micro B from the factory is really great. All I did was make that one change in the back, and it was just awesome. Anyway, I hope these tips were helpful to you guys, and if you have any tips of your own, please feel free to share them in the comments, any corrections, anything like that, because we're all learning here, and, you know, good tips are hard to come by. Anyway, with that being said, I'm really happy with this. I hope that you guys get some value out of this video, and if you do, give me a like, and if you like this type of content, you should subscribe. We'll be revealing the blown up racetrack next. I got rid of the carpet. We're doing the whole thing better now. So when that's ready, we'll show that off too. And yeah, we'll catch you in the next video. See you next time. Bye.